when I was growing up, there was probably only one thing that I was ever going to get an A star for, and that was church attendance. Not necessarily because I wanted to go, but because I was forced to go by my mum and dad. Later in life, obviously, I enjoyed going, but the week would be something like Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, we would have the communion service. And then we would go home and have lunch, and then we would come back and do Sunday school or Bible study in the afternoon, Bible class in the afternoon. And then in the evening, we'd have the gospel service where we preached the gospel and hoped that some people would come and hear it and become Christians. And then during the summer in Scotland, we used to have open airs. I've got a photo of my friend Andra and Roger Blackmore. You remember Roger? That's when he had hair and a bit bigger and everything. And my friend Andra, I mean, look at the backdrop for the open air. And that's summer, by the way. I mean, it's not winter. And weather was so bad up where we came from in Scotland, we couldn't do the open airs during the winter. So we would go to the local hospital after the gospel service, and we would go around all the wards singing. You wouldn't be allowed to do that now either. Everybody catching COVID with us singing to them. So that was Sunday, packed full of church and all sorts of things. Monday night was youth night. We gathered together there. Then on Tuesday, we would do a thing. It was like a kids' work called Sunshine Corner. If you've been in an AOG church, you'll know what that is. But it was a kids' work, and I was a junior leader there. And then on Wednesday, we went to another village where we were starting another church, and we would do Sunshine Corner there, followed by a Bible study. And then Thursday night, we would have prayer time. So we would be at the church, and we'd be praying from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. Friday night, we got a day off. Whoa! And then Saturday was Bible study, because all the men in my village, or most of the men in my village, were fishermen. So they were away from Monday to Friday. And so when they came home, what did we make sure they do? They couldn't spend any time with their family because they were at church all the time. Saturday night was Bible study, and Sunday we're back to everything again. Incredible, yes? Who would be up for that? No, I won't ask. And, probably by the time I left primary school, I had heard thousands upon thousands of sermons. And even when we went on holidays, my mum and dad, we used to go to Christian guest houses. I mean, hopefully they've been expunged from the land now. If anybody ever says, do you want to go to a Christian guest house for your holidays for 2 weeks, just say no. It's like hell on earth. You spend all day in services and everything like that. So, but of all the messages and sermons that I've heard, I remember little fragments at the very most, yes? It's a bit like you. After this service, you'll go home at lunch and you go, what did Billy speak about? Can't remember what it was now. And we forget so quickly. But what I remember vividly was spending time around Pastor Blackmore, Roger Blackmore's house on a Wednesday night. After we did all the services, after we did all the stuff, it was around his house. And we sat around tea and coffee and juice and whatever it was, and we talked about all sorts of things, and we talked about Jesus. I remember those times, special times in my life when he mentored and helped me so much. I remember going on car rides with my dear friend Johnny, and we'd be singing at the top of our voice. I mean, none of us could sing, so it's a good job if there was only two of us in the car, singing at the top of our voice, praising Jesus at the latest music tape, cassette tape. And then we would have prayer meetings in the car as we drove to the local town nearby, probably because we liked the look of two girls there or something and we wanted to chat them up, I don't know. But we would pray on the way, and we'd pray that maybe the girls would actually see favor on us and everything like that. I remember times in Teddy's house. Teddy was a leader of a local church nearby, and his house was open 24/7. You could go along, and there would always be young people there. And I was introduced to gallon, big tubs, things of lime juice, because there was so many young people all the time. He bought in bulk. I mean, he went to Costco's and got the bulk stuff in, and we would all be sitting drinking lime juice all night and chatting about, and he would talk to us about Jesus. I remember time spent in Gibby in Betty's house. I think I've got a photo of them as well. And Gibby and Betty, again, their house was open. Didn't matter when. You walked in, and if they weren't there, you put the kettle on and you helped yourself to a cup of tea. And Betty had arthritis in her hands. I remember her hands being sort of clawed over like that. And she would sit at the table looking at you in the eyes, smiling and telling you about our wonderful Savior Jesus. I mean, they were like mums and dads to us because they opened their house and they wanted to help and disciple us to follow Jesus. I remember those times. I remember in Bible college, I can't remember much of the lectures, but I remember the common room experience, sitting around chatting with friends and sometimes not so much friends and sometimes arguing about stuff in the Bible. But I remember those incredible times when I can't always remember messages and sermons and everything like that. And you know, for many of us, church is a place that we go to each week, each Sunday, to participate in worship. And we had a great time of worship this morning, yeah? To participate in worship, to hear a message, sometimes good, sometimes bad jokes, to partake in communion, and we're going to do that later in the service, and maybe have some fellowship in Strudwick's over a coffee, or even donuts. I understand there's donuts again today. Tim Hortons. Fantastic. And after an hour or two, it's all over and we go home. Now, don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? I believe in the gathering of his people in church. I believe in us coming together. It's maybe not ideal the way we do it, but I believe that it's important for us to set aside time to come and meet with other believers and corporately worship together and pray together and hear God's word together. I believe that those times are really important. I mean, before COVID, I used to hear a lot of times saying, the church needs to get out of the building. Have you ever heard that? The church needs to get out of the building. Well, how has the last 18 months, when we've been out of the building most of the time, how has that helped the church? Has the church exploded in growth and there's more people that know Jesus and there's more people are coming to know Jesus all over the place because the church has been out of the building for the last 18 months almost? You with me? I don't think it has helped the church. I know we've used technology and we've met online and everything, but the last 18 months has not, on the face of it, helped the church. I believe we'll learn lessons from it and everything like that. The church has always been out of the building. Because how many hours are there in a week? I think there's, if my maths is right, I'm not as good as Radicano, but I think there's about 168 hours in the week. And we spend an hour in church together as a group of people, his church. And then we have got the other 167 hours to spend out of the building, yes? You look at me a bit worried now. And we have got that opportunity to live for Jesus 167 hours of the week, and we only have to be sitting in pews like this 1 hour a week. The problem is not the building. The problem is what we do with this 167 hours. That we live like Jesus in our streets. That we live the way that he would live. We would pray for our neighbors. We talk about bless, and we're saying to eat with people, to serve people, to invite people around, to befriend people, so that we can help them to know Jesus. You don't seem like you're in agreement with me on that. So I believe that we should meet. Continue to meet together. Church online is a wonderful thing. It helps us in so many ways. But church life is about community. Church was never meant to be a place that we attend, but it's a community that we belong to. And last week, John talked about us being called to disciples. I'd encourage you to go back and have a look at that message, how Jesus calls us to a life of discipleship. But this week, I want to suggest to us that discipleship is worked out in community. In fact, its very name suggests that it can only be worked out in community. Discipleship needs, at the very minimum, two people. You with me? A disciple and a discipler, yes? You need at least two people. So it has to be worked out in community. It can't be a solo experience. A quick read of the New Testament helps us to see that the Christian life is always lived out in the company of others. Jesus called his followers and asked them to be disciples. He spent time with a crowd, great big crowds. He fed them and all sorts of stuff. But he spent more time with a group of about 120 people. And then out of that 120 people, he spent time with 70 people. And once it records that he sent those 70 people out to take the kingdom message to the villages and the towns round about. But he didn't send them out as lone rangers. He paired them up. He put them together. And he sent them out as 35 small teams to bring the message of Jesus to other people. He didn't send people out alone. He spent time with the 70. He went deeper with 12 that we'll remember, that we know as the apostles. He had an inner circle of 3 that he spent even more time. And the Bible records a number of times that there was one disciple, and he was known as the disciple that Jesus loved. And he had a closer, it would seem, relationship with John. And then we often talk in the church about Paul's missionary journeys, as though it was him that did it all. Paul was never alone. He always had a team of people with him everywhere he went, and he would drop them off in different places and pick them up. And so we could read about Barnabas, Timothy, Luke, John Mark, Epaphras. The list goes on. Paul lived in community. He wasn't some sort of one-off missionary machine that went around by himself all the time. He saw the need for community. And he traveled in community, and he worked in community. He preached the gospel in community. How do I know that? Well, one of the greatest passages, go home and read it today, greatest passages in the Bible about Christian leadership, you find in Acts 20. It's the point in time when Paul calls his friends, the leaders from the church at Ephesus, to come and meet him in Miletus. And he's saying goodbye to them for the last time. And even at this moment, he is still discipling them and talking to them. You'll find in that passage, if you read it, he talks to them about humility. He talks about trials. He talks about perseverance. He talks about gospel boldness in preaching. And I love it. I love this little phrase. He says, Acts 20, verse 20, "You know that I have not hesitated to preach anything that would be helpful to you, but have taught you publicly and from house to house." He taught them publicly. That might have been in a bigger gathering, I don't know, but he taught outside. He taught them publicly, but he also went from house to house. The great apostle Paul spent time going from house to house, around meals, spending time with the people in Ephesus and in other places. He didn't just preach on a Sunday. He spent time going from house to house. And how do I know how incredible that relationship that he had with this group of people is that this part, and what it talks about is tears. Lots of tears. I mean, when you say goodbye to somebody you love. Have you ever watched that program on the TV about emigrating to Australia or something like that? I can't remember what it's called now, Life Down Under or something. And the people are sort of, all the families are sending videos to each other, and like there's tears everywhere, isn't there? Because it's sad, because you know you're not going to see them. Well, you'll see them on Zoom, but you can't spend time with them and touch them and just sit around and laugh together in that way. There were tears because deep relationships were made by Paul. He wasn't a preaching machine. He was a relational guy. You know, the greatest letter that was ever written is contained in the Bible. It's called the Epistle to Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans, and he wrote it at about 57 AD. He was in Corinth, and he wanted to encourage his friends in Rome that he'd heard about, and he wanted them to understand this incredible work that Jesus has done for them. It's a truly majestic letter. It is just unbelievable. It takes you from the helplessness that you feel because you know something is missing in your life, and this relationship between you and God that is so needed is broken, and you know that there's this hole inside that can never be filled, and somehow God comes up with a plan called Jesus. And Jesus dies and rises again to create this incredible grace that we can have this relationship again that is the only thing on this earth that will fill this gaping hole that we've got. And he writes this incredible letter of ecstatic joy of divine relationship through the unmeasurable grace that we find in Jesus. I've got to have read that hundreds of times. I've read incredible books on the book of Romans, from Calvin hundreds of years ago to most recently N.T. Wright. Great scholars writing incredible words about this letter that tells us about our salvation. I've listened to a year-long series by who I think is one of the greatest preachers of all time, a guy called Martin Lloyd-Jones. It's all on the internet, you can find it. But you know, last year I read a book that really challenged me in a new way about this book of Romans. It helped me to see it in a slightly different way. It's called Reading Romans Backwards. Reading Romans Backwards. Go and find it on Amazon if you want and have a look at it. But Paul, it helped me to understand again, Paul is not writing some systematic theology or a thesis on salvation. He's first and foremost writing a letter to his friends. He's writing a letter to his friends, those people that is in his community, and he wants them to know about Jesus. But it's a letter written to his friends. I love the way he opens it in Romans 1, verse 7. It says, "To all that be in Rome, beloved of God." Isn't that great? So he's writing it to you today, to all in Milton Keynes, beloved of God. Some of you need to hear that today. Some of you need to hear that you are loved by God. Yeah, I know. Yes, and he still loves you. He really does. And nothing you can do can stop him loving you, because he's got his eye on you. And he can love you because of the work that Jesus has done. To be loved of God, called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father, Lord Jesus Christ. You know, closing Romans and Romans 16. I was going to read it to you today, but I'm just not going to have enough time, unfortunately. But go home and have a look at it today. Read Romans 16, verses 1 through 16. And what you're going to find there is that this is not just some thesis of a letter, but he goes, greet Priscilla and Aquila. Greet this person, greet that person, say hello to this person, remind this person about me. Go through all this thing. You know, that guy's mother, can you just remember her? So say thank you, because she was such an incredible help to me, like Betty was to me. He's talking about all these names which mean nothing to us, but actually played an important part in the shaping of the Apostle Paul's life and ministry. And you know, I tend to think that the way that we do church leads us to think that discipleship is about gathering information and is primarily done in isolation. You know, so much of our Christian life is done in isolation, and I believe it needs to be done in community. Even what we do here at Milton Keynes Christian Centre, so much of it is done in isolation, even without the masks and the social distancing. Because even on a good day, we're all sitting in rows, aren't we? And the only person talking is me. And I don't know what's going through your head. And if I say something, you're probably thinking, well, that's not right. Or I'd like to ask this. And I don't understand this, Billy. Can you explain that to me? Or can you just go a little bit deeper on that? Because I need to know. You with me? Or maybe you don't think that. But I'm thinking that when I'm sitting there listening to somebody. So I think you might be as well, but we're sitting alone, facing the front, not in conversation, and not the ability to just jump into the conversation so that it helps me that little bit more. And we want to encourage every single person to have a quiet time with God. And absolutely, that is totally important, to get your Bible and read and pray. But also, prayer is found in reading, is found in community. And of course we need to put that in our lives, but let's connect to other people as we do that as well. And we put courses on, and even them, I mean, we're trying to make some changes to them at the moment, but we put on some discipleship growth class courses, and it's me speaking for like 2 hours. And so it's so much is done. What we do for church, particularly around services and that, is done alone, or at least in isolation in terms of conversation. Sorry, does that make sense? And so if we're going to live in community, we've got to make some changes or look at things that are slightly different. John spoke earlier about life groups, and I know life groups can be good, bad, or indifferent, or whatever, but they're an opportunity for community where we invite people into our house, or where they go to their house, like Paul went from house to house, yes? And so we invite people into our house, and we create community, and we sit around, and we have the conversations. I didn't understand what Billy was going on about at that time. Can somebody try and please explain it to me? Or I didn't agree with what Billy said in that thing. And suddenly we're actually starting to dive in a little bit more, and we're starting to remember the things that stick with us for a long time, that I remember for decades, is time spent in people's houses around meals and talking about Jesus that shape and change us. To be part of groups or teams at Milton Keynes Christian Centre. And you know, I want to be completely honest with you. Like never before, we need more people on our teams. Coming back from COVID, some people are not ready to come back to church, and some people, the habit has been broken in their life and they're not coming back, which is sad, but true. And so some people have left our teams, and we don't know if they'll be coming back. So we need people working in our kids' team. We need people on our music. Well, you've got to be able to play music and sing, so they won't let me in that. I've asked a few times. And I'll go and stand in the car park with the guys that go out there. Even there, we need more people in the car park than we've ever had before, because they've changed something across the road at the college, and we need somebody with a card to let you in and out all the time now. So we need more people to be there. And I know it's not a great job sitting at the car park like swiping somebody in with a ticket, is it? But what if somebody was turning up to Milton Keynes Christian Centre for the first time, and they couldn't get in the car park and were ready to go to home, and because you were over there in the car park beside the college and you stood there and swiped them in, they actually came to church that day and gave their life to Jesus? What about that? Yes. Oh, sorry. And by the way, while I'm on it, do us a favor. Unless you've got babies, and I mean babies, not babes, babies, blue badge and disabled and senior citizen, and I'm getting there quick, can you please park across the road? If you don't know what I'm on about, ask somebody at the connection team. We've got a car park across the road, and we want to try and leave the spaces that we've got, because we've got more people coming now. We've had a year and a half off, but we need the car park across the road now, and we need you to be able to do that. Now, this morning, I came in about 8 o'clock. I came into the car park. I dropped my wife off. Men, that's a good thing to do. You with me? It'll get you bonus points with your wife if you do that rather than you jumping off the car and making her take it and walk. So I dropped my wife off and went across and parked the car across the road, and I chose to come walk down the road 5 minutes, enjoy the sunshine because it was night, because I didn't want to go to the minibus and catch COVID with everybody else in the minibus. Just real. So we don't want to cajole you every week. Honestly, guys, please. Just help us, would you? Look for a reason to park across the road. Anyway, so that's nothing to do with my message. And we need friendships and community groups, and we need to mentor each other. On Thursday, the 23rd of September, we're having a special event here where we're going to start to discuss this whole thing about discipling one another, to try and come up with ideas of how we can help one another, create community, enter into relationships that will help us to grow. And we believe every single person in the church can be a disciple maker. So this is not just for people who have been in the ministry for 50 years and been around church it's for everybody, because each and every one of us, God has called us to make a disciple. And we want to start to explore that with you. It's something new and something different for us, and we're not 100% sure how it's going to work, but we want you to join the journey with us to discover what that means, so that we can learn together what it means to disciple somebody else and share with each other the joys that we're having, the challenges that we're having. So we're going to meet to start to talk about that, and we want you to join us. So put in your diary now, 23rd is going to be here. We're going to do coffee and cake. Just come for that if you want. Don't worry, you can be quiet. So don't listen to anything else I'm saying in the service now. Just go straight to your phone, get the website up, mkcc.org.uk/whatever. Go to What's On and look for Growing Disciples. Is that okay? And we want to see as many people here as we can on that day. And we're going to start a revolution within our church that is going to see people discipled by the Teddys and the Gibbies and the Bettys and the Rogers that are already in this house. And we're going to see people grow in Jesus and start to disciple other people and make a difference in this world. That's the vision. We'll get things wrong along the way. We don't know what we're doing half the time, but we're going to give it a go. Yes? Are you with me? That's 3 of us. Good. What's the time? Oh, I've got... where do I go with this? We need to remind ourselves that the first century church gatherings were not in big basilicas, big auditoriums. They were in homes. The Roman believers met in homes, some bigger, some smaller. And think living room rather than auditorium, and think kitchen table rather than pews. And when Phoebe, that great church leader, arrived, hello, come in, arrived in Rome, carrying Paul's precious letter to the believers there. It wasn't read from a pulpit or from a platform. She visited homes, probably 5 or 6 homes with 30 to 40 people in each home. And she sat around a table and talked to them, read them through, emphasized different parts of Paul's letter to him. Questions were allowed and were common. You know something, I said this in the last service. You know, in church, I think the new technology is catapulted this on. And nothing wrong with the technology. I love it, and we use it in every way we can. And I love listening to other preachers and other pastors that help me and grow me. Please, when I say this, don't think I'm saying the technology is wrong. It's helpful and everything. But I think this new technology is giving preachers platforms that they've never had before. And it brings with it fame, money, and sometimes power. And what I know about fame, money, and power is it corrupts even good people. And the temptations that come along with that, and we elevate these people. Now, they're wonderful communicators, don't get me wrong, and I listen to them. But we celebrate and follow these people that don't even know us, that we might get some information from. Yes, I understand. And we celebrate them and we build them up and we put them on a platform. But last week, I don't know if you were here, but last week, James did an interview with a guy called Ray Bowker. I don't know how old he is now, 70 odd. Been a Christian 60 years in his life. And just getting on with it and being a disciple maker for James and for other people, day after day, moment after moment, in a local church, year after year after year. The people that we need to be celebrating and elevating in our churches is the Rays and the Jills, the Bettys and the Gibbies. These are the people that we need to be elevating and celebrating in our churches. Not the latest great preacher that struck it on Instagram. As much as I love listening to them, because they're not really going to make a big difference in Milton Keynes Christian Centre. But as we come together as his community and start to disciple one another and to open our homes, and I'm saying that as an introvert, to open our homes and invite people in, not just for a programmed life group on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, but hey, my house is open. Just knock on the door and come in and eat some jollof rice. Well, you won't get jollof rice at my house, but we have to understand that things have got to be different. And God's plan for his church is a fellowship of difference, all being put together, an odd-bod collection of people in his body, where the visible representation of Jesus on this earth. And he puts all these different people together into his church, and on purpose, for a reason. You know, I've been married 33 years, Friday just gone. Isn't that amazing? That anybody would put up with me, for 33 years is a miracle in itself. You got to believe it. It's not a joke. So I'm glad I don't have to date anymore. Dating when I was a teenager was hard enough. But now, there's apps, I believe. And you get your phone out, and you get your app, and you go, don't like the look of them. Swipe right. She's not bad. Swipe left. And you build up some sort of, anyway, whatever. If it works, that's great. I think Jesus has got an app for church membership. And he looks and he goes, he's a problem. Let's put him into MKCC because he's going to cause them all sorts of problems. Bang. And she, new life. Bang. Shenley, yes. Or whatever else church it is. And he puts us all together into this mix. And he wants us to learn from each other. He doesn't want us to be invisible to each other. He wants us to be visible to each other. All the different people together. There are neither Jew nor Greek, it says, ethnicity. There is neither slave nor free, economic. There is no male or female, gender. For you are all what? One in Christ. It's an incredible experiment, this thing called church, where we all come together to learn to love one another by the power of God's grace so that we can flourish. I wanted to go on and talk a little bit more about the space or the place that that the church gives us. Church, the community of the church, is a space for grace. It's a space for love. It's a space for being around the table in community. It's a space for holiness. And through those things, it's a place where we flourish. I believe a Christian to flourish needs to be plugged into a community of believers, and that community of believers in this earth is called his church. Not this building, but this community of believers is called his church. I haven't got time to go through all them. Maybe I could get them online during the week or something like that. But I just want to turn back to a space for the table. The music team's going to come and we're going to sing as we finish. Jesus turned routine meals into kingdom discoveries. Jesus' disciples learned so much about him and the kingdom every evening when they sat down to eat around the dinner table with him. As they sat down in a normal, everyday meal, he would take the two most ordinary, everyday things that were on the table of every single household of that community at that time, which was some bread and some wine. And he said, you're going to live life together. And when you come together in your houses or together in bigger groups, I want you to always remember me at the center of everything. So when you invite your friends round for pizza or jollof rice or curry or whatever it is, make sure you get the bread and the wine or the Ribena, if you're teetotal, out. And right at the core of everything, before you do everything, or in the middle of what you're doing, bring Jesus into the center and take out the bread so you always remember together that his body was given for us and his blood cleanses us from all sin. To take that into the center of every meal that we have is far better than the ritual that we sometimes do, maybe on a Sunday morning, which there's nothing wrong with. But we need to take the table, the kitchen table needs to become the place and the hub in our homes for Christian life and Christian discipleship. Because the Eucharist, or Thanksgiving as it's called, is a place where we come together for community, for meal, and then we honor Jesus for everything that he's done for us.